Good to start.
Anxious. Huh? Good afternoon. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. This is the Tuesday, April 2nd work session of the City of the Year. First up on our agenda today, we have a presentation from the Linmar Venture Group regarding naming of a creek. So, welcome.
Hello, I'm Thomas Doyle. I'm the environmental specialist in the engineering department, and I have been assisting the Linmar Venture Academics Earth Sciences Group with their project to officially name an unnamed creek in Marion. This project began in fall 2023, and it will be hopefully wrapping up in the next couple months. There's lots that goes into the project that they've been working on, and both the students and their teachers have done a great job with the research and the community outreach involved with the project. With that intro out of the way, some students from the venture group are here to present on the project.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. We're from Linmar and we're a part of the Venture Earth Science class. We're here today to talk to you guys about naming an unnamed creek. This is our teams, the AM and PM class. I'm Elliot. This is Valerie, Lauren, Jackson, Ava, and Lauren. The problem, the creek is unnamed. There's litter everywhere and altogether the creek is just pretty unkept.
All right, so this is the creek we'll be naming. It's the light blue line and it starts at the top and it runs all the way down to Dry Creek, the darker blue line. These are some pictures we took when we went and visited the creek. The top one in the middle shows some deer tracks that we saw, and then the one right under that is some ducks that we saw. And then the one on the right is some algae that we saw in the creek. So we really want to try to keep the creek clean for all the animals. And then these are some more pictures we took when we went to the creek. It just shows the kids in our class exploring and looking at all the different rocks and stuff at the creek.
The solution is to name the creek Cooper's Creek so residents are aware that the creek exists. That'll help residents take better care of the creek, like cleaning it up. For example, this is someone in our AM class, and the day that we went creek stomping, he found that much trash in about 10 minutes. Imagine how much trash a group of volunteers could find. And with more people knowing about the creek, hopefully chloride levels would go down in the winter, and that would help with biodiversity, with plants living or growing there, all the way to animals living there.
So the first step of this process to name the creek was the project was pitched to the first semester classes by Mr. Thomas Doyle in the fall of 2023. Then the first semester classes went out and interviewed residents that lived by the creek, their backyards were by the creek, things like that, and asked them questions like, did they know the creek was there? Did they have a potential name idea for the creek? And then in November of 2023, Mrs. McDowell got us 3 grants for signs that we are going to put up with the name on this creek. The second part of this process started in the second semester. We met with our community partners who gave us key information to learn about the creek. And then we did some research in the winter of 2024 to learn more about the surrounding area of the creek and rocks and the history of Marion. Then we went and saw the creek in February of 2024, where we found rocks and saw wildlife. Then we made our name choices in March of 2024. Then we sent a Google form out to residents that lived by the creek in March of 2024 to vote on their preferred name. And finally, we are here to you today presenting our idea. So as you can see here, we sent the original Google form out to around 140 people, and 53 of those people responded. And out of those 53 people, around 78% of people wanted this creek to be named. and around 22% of people did not want this creek to be named. So a lot of people want this creek to have a name.
So the key partners for this present project helped us tremendously. First of all, Thomas Doyle was the one who pitched this project to Venture. He also gave us information about the water features, the chloride levels, the litter, and the biodiversity at the creek. Herb Anderson not only completed an interview, but he also allowed us onto his property so we could explore the creek for ourselves. Charlotte McDermott was our geologist, and she gave us information about the geology all throughout Iowa. David Hockett was our historian, and he gave us information and maps about Marion in the past. Alyssa McDowell filled out a grant form and got it approved for us, so the city of Marion will not have to pay any money for these signs at all.
We like that.
And the McClure Foundation were the people who gave us the grant, so once again, there will be no money from the city of Marion paying for these signs. And last but not least, Kathleen Kelly is our rhetoric teacher, and she kept this project going after first semester to give this creek a name. So thank you to everyone who helped us in this project. So some residents or like people living around the creek might have some concerns with what this name may change, and we wanted to make sure that everyone knows that it will not change the wetland status, it will not become a floodplain, it will not change environmental regulations, it will not change the property taxes, insurance rates, or anything like that. The only thing that is changing is a name on a federal map. Absolutely nothing else is going to be changed. So the three name ideas that we came up with for this creek were Quartz Creek, Limestone Creek, and Cooper's Creek. We thought of Quartz Creek because there was a lot of quartz at the creek, and also Quartz Creek is just a pretty name. We thought of Limestone Creek because there was a lot of limestone at the creek, and limestone helps give nutrients to soil and can help plants and biodiversity grow. And finally, we settled on Cooper's Creek. So in 1845, Joseph Cooper moved to Marion with his wife, Polly Cooper, and they had 5 children together. They were one of the earliest families in Marion, and when we looked at old maps provided by David Hockett, we saw that they had, like, their name was everywhere on the map, and they had owned a lot of land. And they lived there for about 180 years. 90 of those years were spent near the creek. And not only were they one of the first families in Marion, they were just outstanding citizens overall. They always helped within their community and church, and family and friends of the Coopers said that they had strong personalities. They said that they were kind-hearted, respected, and hardworking, and they were overall just good people in general. So we believe that Cooper's Creek will help represent Marion and its history.
We interviewed 53 residents along the creek. 60% voted for Cooper's Creek, 30 for Quartz, and 9.4% for Limestone Creek. Our next steps would be to get your approval, and then we can send the name to the USGS so that they can put the name on any federal maps that they create, and then we could put signs up around the creek. We need your approval to move our project forward in naming our creek. Thank you so much for your time, and we would love to answer any questions that you probably have.
Thank you. All right, questions. We'll start with Councilmember Muskimin.
Yeah, first of all, thanks you guys for doing this really organized, really thoughtful presentation and taking the time to look at an underutilized area and care for it and try to find a name for it. My question for you guys is, if we approve this, how long is the timeline process for it to get approved by that federal board and for the name to actually get changed? Do you know?
So it all depends on the federal government. So
Sure.
I believe, so we've done 2 renamings in the past. Squaw Creek was changed to Wanatee, and Willowwood went from an unnamed to a named. So it all depends on what's in the queue. It could take 6 months. It just depends. So
Sure.
for future steps, we have on the consent agenda for Thursday to approve a resolution with Cooper's Creek. Then they would fill out the application. Basically, that goes with that application so that it shows the jurisdiction is in support of that change. And then it's just a matter of when they process it.
Sure. Yeah, I remember that with Wanatee, so I don't remember how long it took, but I remember it was a minute.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Go ahead, Grant.
So you're all in the Linmar Earth Science class? Oh my gosh. I was a Earth Science teacher at Linmar long ago in a galaxy far, far away. You know, as I think back to the projects my students did, I must admit, maybe it was a deficiency of my instruction. But here are some things that I picked up about what you've accomplished and understanding that it's taken a couple of semesters to pull this off. You had a project, you had an experiment, if you will. You articulated the problem, you had a problem statement. You assessed the current state of the creek, how it looks, probably how it smelled, not entirely sure. You identified a solution and why that solution was good. If you name it, it gets recognition and visibility. You had a process structure across those 2 semesters in order to accomplish the work that was necessary in order to be successful. You identified and interfaced with your project stakeholders, those that were going to help you understand what the problem is or help you make it successful. And then finally, you had naming criteria that you identified and what was important about landing on the final name of Cooper's Creek. So I just wanted, from my vantage point, way distant earth science teacher at the high school, I want to congratulate you on your work.
Councilmember Jensen.
Yeah, I agree with Grant 100%. I think the process you went through, you articulated how you did it, the steps you did. I think interviewing the residents and getting them involved in the buy-in was major. So to me, that's really good. But I have 2 questions for a follow-up, and that's kind of like, where do you go from here? So again, I told you one of the things I'm really interested in is how did you come up with the name? So you've kind of told us what that is. So my question about the name is, in the signage, anywhere along that creek or at a couple of spots, will there be a sign with the story about the Cooper family and how the creek got its name? That's one question. The second question is there going to be any effort on an ongoing basis to keep that creek cleaned up by any group in the Linmar School District?
So when it comes to what the signs will say, it's only going to say the name of the creek. And then what was your second question? Sorry.
Second question is there going to be any effort by any group at in the Linmar School District to keep the creek cleaned up? You've made the effort already to this point to get it cleaned up. Will there be an ongoing effort to keep it clean?
So we're hoping that we can get some volunteers to help clean up the creek a bunch, but we don't necessarily have a plan yet for how we're going to keep that going. But we want to start one.
Yeah, I'd encourage you to at least see if there's a way to come up with at least a sign somewhere about the naming of the Cooper family, because that's history that I was not aware of. And I think anybody that goes by it, so if there's a way to accomplish that, I think that would be really nice to have out there. So great job.
Is there consistent water in the creek?
Yeah.
There is. Okay. In your research, did you find out why it wasn't unnamed previously? Why it was unnamed previously? Any idea or indication? Yeah, I was just curious why it didn't have a name yet. But well, thank you so much for all your work on this. Oh yeah, well, go ahead.
I have a question for you. Did you or do you know the origins of the creek? Is it a spring-fed creek where it starts? Did you figure all that out? Yes, spring-fed?
Yes, when we went and like creek stomped, we did see the spring where all the water comes out.
Ah, very neat.
That's great.
Yeah, great.
Well, I just love everything about this. First of all, it shows your community mindedness and your commitment to the community and that you care. I love that the process you went through for finding a meaningful name that has significance. I'm pretty sure I went to school with some of the Cooper kids, so, at Linn-Mar. And, I'm sure they'd be really, touched to know that this is taking place. I love the collaboration, and you're collaborating with community partners and finding partners, because that's what we do as a city. And we find that that really helps us accomplish things that we otherwise wouldn't be able to accomplish when you bring along other people and you get buy-in from people, and the buy-in from the residents, the reaching out to various people with different expertise who are able to help you and bringing people to the table. I'm sure led to the success of this project. So congratulations on everything you've accomplished, and we thank you on behalf of the community. And we have more questions?
Sarah's hand was raised on the Zoom.
Oh, yes, I forgot to mention that Councilmember Menzer is joining us virtually, so she has a question.
Hi, sorry, everybody, work travel. This creek actually runs right by my house or across the street from our house, so I appreciate all the work that you did on this. And I will attest, yes, there are a lot of deer. They just use our sidewalk many of the times to just walk down when they're tired of being in the mud. Quick question, and this may be more for Dave, but I know that there's a borderline there with Cedar Rapids on the other side, but is it all Marion? I mean, it sounds like you reached out to community members on both sides of the creek. I was just curious if do we have to do anything with Cedar Rapids on this? Since it's so close to them with the naming? Or does it stay close enough because I think the house that was in one of the pictures is our friends, the little bridge goes across to their house. And I know Herb's place is fronts both sides of the creek, but I wasn't sure just north of Boysen where it's kind of by the pool and then rounding up in that first little neighborhood section you see from Boysen up to that break there, if that side of the creek is in Cedar, if it's Marion or if that's in Cedar Rapids.
So this is Thomas Doyle again. So I've been in touch with Cedar Rapids watershed coordinator about getting this on their council agenda as well, because this creek is generally kind of the border between Marion and Cedar Rapids down on that southern portion. But
Yes.
part of the watershed is still, the watershed still contains part of Cedar Rapids. So this will be going to City of Cedar Rapids as well as the Linn County Conservation Board, because parts of the northern stretches of the creek are technically still in Linn County.
Okay, thank you. And thank you all for your work on this. We just always called it the creek. So now it will have a name.
Any other questions? Thank you again on behalf of the community for all your work. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job. Our next item is a presentation from the Marion Water Board. We have members of the board here and the director.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council. Welcome. I do have my Water Board Chair, Terry Chu, former city engineer from way back in a couple moons ago, but he is here. We do rotate our board members every year on the calendar, and Terry was elected to be the chairman for this year. As you all are aware, we're a political subdivision of the city. We have our own board, our own insurance, our own employees, and we set our own water rates, as we'll talk a little bit later on here. I have a picture of our water tower. I have great news. The Marion Water Board has selected a consultant, and in the end of this year, we're going to be embarking and going out for bids on a new water tower off of the new property off of Lucor Road that the city and the water department embarked on. Currently, we have a contractor up there doing demo work on the old Blackford Farm site up there. The Marion Parks Department took care of the little bit of asbestos that was removed up there, and also did a structural analysis of the 2 corn cribs that were up there in a silo that is going to be remaining, and hopefully a future reach higher part of Marion and do an observation deck maybe or something on top of that corn crib. Plans more to come, but we're looking and reaching higher up there. So let me introduce our water board. We have John Bender. He's former city engineer back in the day. John McIntosh, recently, community resident, got the big award here at the State of the City. Amy Olson, who's got some good background at Alliant, and also Mid-America. Again, Terry Chu, who is present, and then William Kling. He's the husband of Susan Kling, former library director a few days ago, and Mr. Kling is our accountant. He's our actuary and gets down into the weeds. I'm going to flash up here our proposed budget that was approved in January. We have one line item in the city's overall budget for our expenditures with the other enterprise accounts that you have. We're just shy of 7 million is what we're looking at for a balanced budget. We're going to be pulling just over $300,000 from our cash reserves to balance our budget moving forth. Here are some of our big capital projects that are going to hit our budget this year. Several of them are with the Marion Engineering Department, redoing water lines along with the total reconstruction of the city streets. My board does want to thank you, and I personally thank you with the Alburnett Road, the ARPA funding. You see one of the projects up there is $0. That's being funded this year by the ARPA funds. I think we'll have to kick in some. We got the initial numbers back and everything's expensive. So we'll be kicking in some as well as the city to complete that project. But that water main along Alburnett Road, the old central area, is desperately needed to be relayed. Also have some other good news. Our first project for the calendar year 2024, our new Solarian well has been constructed, and we have a good drinking water source coming for the future. Water tests are done. Looks like we're going to need another iron removal filter building out there in the future. But if we have water, we can clean it and we'll sell it. Marion's not going to be going dry anytime soon. Another big project, yeah. Was there a question? Nope. Another project on board for the Marion Water Department is, you see that orange or pink rectangle there, that's down where our former rental house was there. That was demoed a couple years ago, and thank you. We finally got reimbursed for that project here just recently. But we're looking at a 5,000 square foot storage facility there. Another picture here. Martin Gardner, a local architect, is under design, putting those plans together. We hope to start here in August. Just 5 bay doors, and we're just kind of running out of storage room. We got to move multiple trucks to get to some of our storage areas down there. And we hope
Where's the
to.
location of that, Dave?
The location is right there at our existing facility at the corner of 8th Avenue and the future Alburnett Road location there. So that's our existing shop. We're kind of tucking it into that hillside there. Should fit just nicely in there and utilize the existing driveway and parking that we currently have. Talk about water rates. I think you guys have that on the agenda coming up. We have a public meeting coming up next month, 4 p.m. We're looking at raising $150,000 just to keep up with inflation. Alliant is Alliant here. Alliant keeps raising our rates. That's kind of a direct pass through for us. We're pushing $450,000, maybe even $500,000 is our electric bill every single year. Our big motors take a lot of energy, and as those rates go up, we have to kind of pass that and go through. What's the impact on a minimum bill? It's going to be 20 cents on a 2-month bill, and average family use about 1,200 cubic feet. For the average customer, that's going to be about 70 cents in a 2-month bill, or just over a penny a day is what we're looking at for an increase. I would open it up to some other questions. Just a few of the things that are coming down the line are lead and copper inventory map. That's a EPA required thing, is 99% done. All we have to do is check a few more things and we'll push the send button off to the DNR. All that work is to be completed in October. Consumer confidence report, DNR signed off on that just yesterday, so those will be hitting the mail. And pending weather, we're going to start our annual fire hydrant flushing program. It'll begin next Monday, again, weather permitting. So those are some of the big rocks that we'll be tackling, along with some water main relay projects with engineering. We're doing one on our own. We have 13 contractors already looking at our plans. for some old main over on Tama Street.
How do you decide when a new well is needed? I mean, how do you come to that conclusion?
Yes, good question. So that well is east of town out by Rookwood, and Rookwood is growing rapidly. We own the ground from back in 2013. And as development approaches, we want to be there first. It's kind of a messy, it's a loud process to drill a well. We evaluated it with 2 different studies to determine, is it worth drilling a well out here or not? We did the same 2 studies up by the future elevated water tower out there. That one came back not so positive. This site did come back positive with those 2 earlier results. And we put the plans together and hired a contractor and went out and drilled the well. So right now there's a 18-inch diameter pipe sticking out of the ground about 18 inches, and the farmer's got it GPSed in, is gonna drive around it until we need additional water and supply, and the roads kind of get out there so we can access that and develop the future park plan out there with Parks Department. So it's, to answer your question real short, we had the land, we evaluated it, and we know the development's coming. We wanted to get in there.
It's
and
not a
make that
matter of
less.
current need, it's just planning for the future.
We're planning for the future. If that well would have came up dry, we know we got to keep looking and looking elsewhere. And the next location on the burner would be somewhere on the southern edge of town, down by the Gardner Golf Course, is what we're prospecting for a future well.
Okay,
Good
Yes.
question.
go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, Todd, so you mentioned that, you're tapping into a Silurian
Mhm.
aquifer. What's the other aquifer that we tap?
Jordan.
The
Aquifer.
Jordan?
Mhm.
What are your perspectives about, how are those recharged, or maybe where are they recharged? And has there been any negative influence on those relative to our recent drought conditions?
To the recent drought issue, the Silurian has not been impacted. That will recharge a lot more readily. The Jordan Aquifer is with Lynn and Johnson County, that we are in a location where that's heavily monitored, because not only Marion, but industry and down in North Liberty, we're sucking it dry. It's losing head every single year. The DNR, I sat on the EO80 committee, chaired it with, put on there by the governor back in 2012. There are a bunch of consultants, other communities, industry sat on that committee. It's a kind of a scary dive. The DNR were just kind of handing out Jordan Aquifer permits and not saying there's plenty of water down there, which is right. There's plenty of water down there. But we have to keep lowering and lowering our pumps to get to that water. And at some point, the water gets a little murky. It gets harder to pull out of there, more expensive, because you're lowering that pump out. As long as I'm reigning here for the water department, we're not going to sink another Jordan Aquifer. It's very expensive. There's a lot more criteria and rules in place to protect the water source that's down there. I'm not sure where Google's going to pull a lot of their water for the cooling. Maybe Cedar Rapids is going to sell them water, but ADM is also pulling water out of the Jordan as well. So we are watching it. The Silurian's a more sustainable one. It will recharge longer. The Jordan Aquifer is hundreds of thousands of years old. It does not recharge rapidly.
I don't know if this could be incorrect, but in my mind, there's a statistic that somebody mentioned one time that takes 100 years for the water to move laterally 1 foot or something like that in the
Yeah,
Jordan
it
Aquifer.
depending on the soil conditions, the bedrock, the formation there, yeah. There's reports of the water that we're drinking out of the Jordan, and we get last year was 60% out of the Jordan. We're moving more into the Silurian. Hopefully we'll get to a 50-50 blend. But the Jordan Aquifer water is 300 to 400,000 years old. It's very, very old water. And will it recharge? It recharges, but the state of Iowa is pulling out more water than is being recharged.
Other questions? You go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I have my notes right. Did you say for the new elevated water tower that would go to bid at the end of this year?
It'll go
Or
out to bid, yeah. We'll-
construct, so that would be constructed next year then? Or was it
Unfortunately,
done
there's
then?
about 2 contractors that build these towers. 3 of them have been done by the consultant we hired in the Des Moines metro area. They usually get 2 bidders and they kind of bid against each other. They have so much work that once you get the bid, you award it. They may start 8 months away, but it takes a good 2 to 2.5 years to get that fully constructed. And if you give them a tight timeline, you're gonna pay through it. Right now, it's looking at about $4.5 million to $5 million tower that the water department's going to have to front.
Thank you.
About 6 or 8 years ago, it would have been about 2 million for a
Oh.
1 million gallon elevated, but costs have gone up and
Wow.
yeah.
Any other questions? Anything to add, Todd?
Nope, if you guys ever want a personal tour, give me a call.
Thank you.
And keep drinking the tap water. I don't see any bottled water, but I was gonna bring my pitcher of water and fill up your cup with it. There you go. Thank you, Will.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Terry. The next item is an update on the automated curbside collection services. Welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Tillemine, Solid Waste and Recycling Manager at Public Service.
Hi, Matt.
We're here today to give an update on our automated collection service. A few months ago, council approved our automated trucks and cart sizes. We're now ready to determine the appropriate fees for monthly services along with the fees for additional carts. Our team has worked through milestones and set dates to go active the second week of September. Along with that, Finance, DA Davidson, SCS have worked through numbers that include additional tonnage, reduction of bag tags, added fees for our curbside yard waste pickup, debt service, and future capital costs. Solid waste is an enterprise fund and that we work to ensure our revenues are in line with overall operational expenses. Moving from manual garbage pickup to automation is one of our strategic plan goals. Under Sustainable Infrastructure and Services, Section 4.3, which reads, complete solid waste collection study and implement recommendations. Now I'd like to introduce Jeff Phillips from SCS Engineers, our project manager. Tonight, he's going to walk us through what we have accomplished thus far, recommended fee structure for our automation, and next steps for implementation with our public rollout at the city showcase on April 20th.
Thanks,
Matt. Good evening.
Hello.
So I started off the previous presentations the same way I'm going to start off tonight, just a quick update of kind of what we've been doing and where we're at. So we'll talk, like I said, general update, cart size recommendations, proposed rollout schedule, and next steps. And again, just quickly as a reference point, when we started this, there was a collection study to identify the potential most efficient strategy for collecting material. And through several different scenarios, we got it narrowed down to these, and then went through another round of iterations to really do a deeper dive into what each of these opportunities are presented to the city, what they might potentially cost, and then that leading into a recommendation of the strategy of A1. A1 was a scenario where there would be a continued split collection, a split truck to collect recycling and garbage at the same time. This would be an automated truck, meaning it would have a mechanical arm that would grab the garbage cart, tip it into the vehicle, then it would advance a little bit forward and pick up the recycling cart if it is set out. Therefore, the individual, the staff person, the intention is that they are not getting out of the vehicle. They're staying in the vehicle to help maximize safety, but also maximize efficiency of collection. Weekly yard waste collection would also continue to be a service to be provided. There'd be 3 dedicated garbage trucks and a recycling truck, so they're doing those same functions at the same time, plus a backup, and there'd also be a dedicated yard waste truck. As you may recall, in sometime late last year, we presented the potential costs to the city for those specific services. So we broke down all the individual costs associated with performing each of those services based off the finance data that we had from you all, plus the field observations that we did about the programs and the participation. And that led into the December numbers of the total cost for performing the scenario of A1 to be about $19.24 a household. Things have changed over time, and so working with the city staff, wanted to update those figures to bring them into 2024 dollars, but also some of the processing and tipping fees for the garbage and the recycling has changed. So we wanted to account for that information and give an as accurate figure as possible for what it would cost the city to perform these services. So that the scenario for A1 will cost the city about $21.21. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah, it'll cost the city $21.21 per household per month to perform these services. The line underneath that box is part of the study was also to do a rate study for what is it costing the city to do its current activities. So current collection programs is costing about $16.67 a household. Where are we at in the process of the transition? We're kind of leading into the third stage, if you will, where we've done vehicle procurement. We've talked about cart sizes. We've looked at service rates. We've identified grant opportunities to help potentially pay for those recycling carts, or at least subsidize the cost of those. Then pending kind of any decision yet this month would lead into cart procurement. We've been going through city ordinances, or staff has been doing that with some guidance, and also taking a look at the policies and procedures for what if this particular situation happens, how are we going to do that? How are we going to communicate that? And what is the frequency of that communication? So there's a lot of different moving parts to all of this, and customer communication is always ongoing with this. But the next steps would be leading into a route evaluation. We realize that we're going to be changing pretty significantly how material is collected. So instead of manual, it's going to be automated. So they're going to be able to collect more houses, more customers in a particular day, but the routes will need to be changed to maximize that efficiency. Also talk about a very detailed rollout schedule. When are containers going to be available, and how are they going to be delivered to the customers? But then also there's a scheduled opportunity for a rollout of the conversation about this program for the City Showcase on April 20th. All of that is leading to the anticipated rollout of the services being performed in September. So as I said, vehicles are ordered. We're anticipating them to arrive July, August, which is great. It'd be nice to have them well ahead of schedule. Communication outreach has already been ongoing. I think I've got a slide later on that talks about some of the outreach that's already been performed. Like I said, the City Showcase is scheduled for April 20th, so there'll be some information about this program. And then the anticipated date for allowing customers to choose the cart selections, which we'll talk about in a second, would be on or about June 15th, so that we've got time to roll everything out, and we've got all the systems in place so we can make sure that everybody has an opportunity to select the size of carts that they feel like would work best for them. Throughout this whole process, we've been meeting with city staff on a regular basis, sometimes weekly, sometimes several times a week. We also had pretty much a full day strategic planning session with staff, so appreciate their time. I know it was a very long day, but it was really important to go through all the different nuances to then start establishing a timeline and go through those policies, procedures. Also, we've been really getting into the weeds with the finances, as that's a pretty important part, not only what it's going to cost the city, but what rates might the city need to charge the customers to perform those base services and allow those services to continue. And then staff has met with other administration departments to talk about the process and procedures for how billing is going to be performed and what that looks like. Just to back up a little bit to talk about all of the work that's gone into this. This is kind of a repeat slide from previous times, but we did field observations, so we did time motion studies when we first started this. Staff has done a collection survey to residents and customers to figure out How are they participating in the programs? Staff also did a count for how much extra bags they were picking up, who was participating in yard waste, really to get a feel for boots on ground, what is actually happening participation-wise in the program, because that's going to influence uh, um, the size of containers and who we think is going to participate in the programs. We also looked at the comparable communities for the services that they provided and the rates that they have, and how what type of carts you could select, and are there different rates for that, and how they rolled those services out. Continue to update the financial model for the desired scenario. Worked collaboratively with all the different city departments that would be engaged to get that communication going. And then also working on how the customers might interact with the containers and what types of sizes they might end up selecting. So this slide looks very familiar. This was the slide that we showed last time when we talked about the size of carts. And just as a reference, that dotted line, everything to the left of that line is a standard program. So the standard program, if I'm a customer and I am eligible to receive garbage and recycling services, you will get a garbage cart and you will get a recycling cart. The standard cart would be that size, that 64 to 68 gallon for garbage, and the same size for recycling. As part of the communication and outreach, there is an opportunity for people to opt in to say, I want a smaller size. And that smaller size option is a 46 to 48, again, for garbage and for recycling. So the standard service is garbage and recycling collection weekly using those carts. And a completely opt-in program would be, I would like my yard waste collected curbside. And to do that, it's an automated process, so it needs a cart. It needs a cart that's compatible with that vehicle. And so that would be an opt-in program where the resident would say, I would like to participate in curbside collection for yard waste. They will always have the option to participate in the city's yard waste site, so they can continue to take yard waste to that site for free. A little bit of the details here as far as the policies and procedures. The intention is to have a good amount of communication about this program. I think there's already interest in, and people are aware of it, but there will be a media blitz, if you will, to have them sign up for the cart. And if we don't hear from you, you will get the standard carts. This is what's going to be delivered to you. It's a new program, and most of these new programs, the other communities also had something similar to this to say, we would suggest a 90-day window. So if you get a 64-gallon cart, maybe that's too big for you, and you realize I've lived with it for a couple weeks now, and I realize it's too big. I would like a smaller cart. We want to make sure that this is something that is successful and for the community. So the opportunity would be, if you communicate that within 90 days, the city will schedule a swap out. So they'll swap that cart out at no additional charge. If it's beyond that period, there is a cost to swap that cart out, set that cart out into inventory and deliver it, and then also take the existing cart and bring it back into inventory for something else. So there's a fee for that, which a lot of the comparable communities also had established. So the fee for that swap out, if it's past that 90-day window, would be $50. We also talked about that people may want, although the data didn't really support much for people needing an additional cart, but we wanted to provide the opportunity. If you want an additional cart, one can be provided to you, but it has to be in that 64, 68 gallon size. It really helps with inventory to keep that extra cart size consistent. And with that, that's an additional fee of $75 for that cart. In that customer is purchasing, they're covering the cost of that cart and the delivery and setup fee for that. Plus, then there's an additional service fee, obviously, per month for that, because there's costs associated with collecting that extra cart and material and then taking it for processing. That additional cart fee for garbage is recommended at $7.50 a month, that additional cart. And the additional cart for recycling would be $5.50 a month. Then we take a look at the yard waste, again, a completely opt-in program. If you opt in, again, within the initial opt-in period, there is no setup fee. The cart is just delivered to you, and the cost would be assessed to the household at $10 per month for participation in that program. If there is an additional cart that's needed, say, I actually want another cart. So there would be, again, you're purchasing, you're helping subsidize the cost of that cart, and then there's that delivery setup fee. So it'd be $75 delivery charge. After that, then there would be the $10 per cart per month fee for participation in curbside yard waste collection. So this slide is trying to bring everything into one slide. So the standard service of garbage and recycling weekly collection, regardless of cart size that you have, would be $25 a month. If you and there's no charge for that as part of the initial rollout program. Now, if there's additional carts, there may be fees associated with that. Then the opt-in program for yard waste curbside collection would be $10 per month. And I'll back up a little bit to the garbage and recycling. That fee includes the operations of the compost facility. It includes the operations of the recycling drop-off and capital investments and the operations for recycling and garbage collection and processing fees. So that $25 is a base fee, which covers all of that. What it doesn't completely cover is the cost of someone going to collect yard waste at curbside. That's where that $10 comes in. So if you want someone to come to your house to collect yard waste and manage it for you, there's a separate fee for that. So trying to standardize and make the fees equitable for if there's an extra service that's being provided, that entity or that customer is paying for that service fee. And then down below is again, the summary of additional cart services. So if it's an additional cart, there's a one-time fee of $75 to deliver that cart, take the old one away, do all the inventory thing, and then there's the service. If it's garbage, if there's weekly service at $7.50 a month extra. If it's a recycling cart, it's $5.50 extra per month. And if it's a yard waste service, it's $10 per month per cart. Some of the services that will not change is the house pickup. So we previously talked about that. There are some questions that will those services, and this is where someone is getting off the truck and assisting the customer and getting the carts to the vehicle, and so that it can be collected. So that service will continue, but it will be audited annually, and that's to be determined on what that audit process looks like. But we want to minimize the amount of the frequency of someone getting off of that vehicle, and because we've done a lot of work to go to automated collection, so we want to try and keep them in the vehicle as much as possible. There will still be a service of $40 for 15 minutes of bulky and special item pickup. So that service would still be available to customers. So I may not need an extra cart every month. Maybe twice a year there's something that happens. I still have the opportunity to participate in this program so that extra waste can be picked up. The bag tag, so there will be a one bag limit. So the sticker program will continue, although the data has shown that the size of carts should more than cover the amount of garbage that's currently being generated. And there is no expectation that because I'm changing the cart size that your consumption habits are going to change. It's not like you get an extra 2 gallons or in this case, 32 gallons that you're going to shop more or that you're going to generate more garbage. Your consumption habits will remain the same. What will change is your behavior. At least we've seen that in other communities that have had this rollout program. The amount of garbage we have seen has decreased and the amount of recycling has increased, primarily because these programs offered more garbage and more recycling capacity than the previous program, which is happening in this case. So that cardboard that may not have fit in the recycling container all the time was being thrown away. So now we're gonna be able to capture more recycling, which is a good thing, and divert it from disposal. So this is another chart here of talking about, okay, we'll need to do procurement to get those carts. And that's about a 6 to 8 week process of getting those carts procured, labeled, branded, and delivered. And then, the selection period, sorry, to communicate with the customers about what size cart they would like. Then about a 4 to 8 week period to get the procurement process, and then about a 2 week delivery. And then assuming we roll out the program the very next day, we've talked about that 90-day window where, hey, this cart's not the right size for me. I thought it was going to be, it's not working. They would contact the city and get a swap date scheduled so that they can get the container that's going to work for them. And this is the previous slide that I talked about to show you kind of where we're at in the process. We're on the end of switching from blue to green, if you will, where we're starting to lean towards more of actually rolling the program out. So as far as next steps, at April 18th, there will be a meeting to consider the rates that we talked about on that slide. And so we've already talked about the cart sizes, the services, and the rates, but then also the extra services. We wanted to have all of our ducks in the row in that regard so that we had, then how does that impact policy? How does that impact procedure? How does that impact communication? How does it impact ordinance? There's a lot of different things that need to line up. So a lot of work's gone into evaluating that. And then in April is the solicitation for a vendor to provide those carts. And we anticipate that they would be responsible for assembling and delivering those carts to customers. There will be also a planned route evaluation to see how we're changing the routes. We understand that. We want to keep, if you're on a Monday route, the hope is that we can keep you on a Monday route. We want to keep as much consistency as we can, but the routes will definitely get bigger for those trucks because of the efficiency. That's it. Are there any questions?
Questions? Yeah, let me start with a couple of questions. So we started out, I remember from previous meetings, we're talking about rolling this out a quadrant of the city at a time. Is that still how we're going to be doing that?
I can't say for sure, but I think it's by week. I think so. We talked about the carts aren't going to be delivered on a Monday. We're not going to be able to deliver them all, but over the period of a month, they would be delivered.
The entire city?
I think that's the plan. Yeah.
Entire city would have their carts at their houses, but when would so actually then the entire city, we're going to start that on a citywide basis all at once instead of a quadrant at a time like we talked about this winter?
I think the plan would be is that we could, if it could be rolled out over the period of the month, and I don't know exactly the delivery schedule or how many carts are going to be delivered to homes, but I don't think it's going to be September Monday starts, October Tuesday starts. I think that we will have the automated trucks. And
yeah, they're here.
Sorry?
Yeah, I understand. Okay, so it's going to start out on a citywide basis faster than we maybe originally anticipated.
Okay, yes.
So my other question is this. So I'm looking at the cost of this, and this is what the residents are going to be looking at.
You bet.
So if I have all three services, it's $25 for garbage and recycling, $10 for yard waste. That's $35 a month.
Correct.
What am I paying now? I have to ask that question because I don't pay our bills at home. So I could ask my wife, what does that cost to a citizen today?
I believe it's $20 a month.
$20 a month.
That's what it's costing the city.
Yeah, that was city's cost.
Oh, here, I'm sorry. I think I know where you're trying to go. So underneath that table, the 1667, and again, that's in 2022 dollars when we started all of this. Okay, so we've not updated those numbers, but you can imagine those have increased. Okay, you're charging $20 right now for the customer. But at the time, the cost to the city was about 1667.
So the citizen today, when we roll this out, their monthly bill will go up by $15 a month.
If they have all three services, yes.
If they have all three services.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you know, I think how we communicate that, I mean, I understand, I'm all for the program from the convenience, from the standpoint of what it does for the employees, the mechanization of it. I mean, all the rationale there, I'm behind 100%. I also know that as we roll out, we obviously have to pay for the trucks. We have to get a sinking fund built up to pay for future trucks. So I understand all of that, but that still seems to be a significant increase. My concern and challenge is how we communicate all of that to our citizens in the manner that they will understand, and why your bill is now going up from $20 to $35 if you have all three services.
Right.
So I mean, to me, that is a major change. And I know down later, we're talking about the utility rates, but that does not reflect the $10. That's reflecting going from $20 to $25, but it's really talking about going from $20 to $35. Okay, when we talk about that change. So to me, that's a significant change. I think how we communicate that has to be handled in a very detailed manner, so.
Yeah, I would agree. And I don't know if you've got anything you want to add?
Yeah. Correct me if I'm wrong, when there's only 30% that participated in yard waste curbside?
Yeah, so thank you. So when we did there was only about 30% of the households were setting out yard waste to be collected. So so keep that in mind, that there's 70% of the 70% of the customers, assuming if they take on the same services that they already have, they'll go from 20 to 25, which is an increase. There's no doubt in that. But the 30% would have that additional $10 increase, so they would have a 15% increase. We don't anticipate that the 30% of set out rates for yard waste is going to continue. Okay, so I think now that there's a cost for that service to have that be curbside, it may decrease the people that participate in curbside. It may not change the amount of material that's going to the yard waste site, because that will always still be an opportunity for them to participate in that.
I think, yeah, I was not aware of that statistic. I mean, only 30% of the people right now put out, only 30% of them put out yard waste?
On a consistent basis, yep. And there's large chunks of the.
Wow. Yeah, I understand that.
So there's large chunks of the community that have never put out yard waste for a whole bunch of different reasons, whether it's a homeowners association or somebody else is taking care of it. And that service right now is free, right? So you do the air quotes and free, that the base rate is paying for that free rate for the participants of that program.
Okay. Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor. Amber's here to talk about the communication. Councilman Jensen, completely understand your point. That is something that we've talked about internally. The messaging is going to be very important. The council is aware of this. I do think it bears repeating for those that are in the audience and those that will watch it later. And that is just from the standpoint of the municipal budget, this service is one of our, what we call an enterprise fund or a proprietary fund. And what that means in layperson's speak is that this service operates as a separate standalone business. It is not subsidized, does not receive property tax to offset the operations. So it is entirely covered by the rates that are charged. Same, Todd had mentioned that earlier as part of the water utility. Water utility is the same way, as is our sewer. So when we look at rates, we have to make sure that we are covering the cost of operating that business. What is different from us as a public entity versus a private business is we are not a profit center. We are not seeking to make a profit. We are seeking to make sure that we are covering our costs for providing that service, to ensure that we have, as Councilman Jensen said, We have our sweeping fund to make sure we're covering our capital costs in the future, because as trucks run down, we've got to replace those. To make sure that if we issue debt, that we have the proper debt coverage in our fund balance to make sure that we are in compliance. So it's an important thing, especially as we go into the next presentation on utility rates, that these are separate business functions that are only covered, the cost of delivering that service is provided by rates that we have to capture. When Jeff was talking about on one of the slides, or it's actually this slide. So when you look at the jump from recycling from December of 2023 to the updated figures, a couple meetings ago, council had a presentation from our partners at the Solid Waste Agency, where they talked about the increase in their tipping fees and all those other costs. So really, those costs that we get are pass-through costs to cover the cost of doing that, taking the trash or the recycling to a location where it's processed and disposed of in accordance with the practices that they have established. So it's just it's an important reminder for all of us as we go through this, that services like garbage, like sewer, like water, those are all business functions, enterprise funds, proprietary funds that are supported by rates and not property taxes.
Before we jump over this slide, a question I have about it. And it really struck me. The main costing driver there is the change in recycling. What caused that to go from 412 to 717?
Primarily what Ryan just said was the processing fee there was a significant increase. So I can't remember exactly what it went to.
Processing fee levied by whom?
By the agency that takes the material. So there's a per ton fee that you pay to take the material somewhere for it to be processed.
I can load up my car and drive out there with all recyclables for nothing. So I'm trying to understand what's driving that number.
So if you, the city has more than you would be able to deliver. And so the agency doesn't charge, right? The agency is not going to charge a vehicle, but the agency has a fee that they pay to cover their costs to process that material, to sort it out into the different containers or material types, then they bale it and then they sell it. So their fee to their customer base is that $100 a ton.
Let me try this, because I'm still grappling with understanding that change in cost. Well, obviously, if we're doing curbside pickup of recyclables, we're incurring a cost to do that. It's time, it's equipment capacity. So I understand that generates a cost. But I'm trying to understand the relative value of that cost compared to what might be externally passed to us by the solid waste agency.
Yeah, so we could.
Because I can take my car out and.
Yeah, two things. One, the processing fee increased. Also, the model changed in that we recognized that by rolling out this new program, the amount of solid waste is going to decrease and the recycling is going to increase. That's what we've seen consistently from other programs.
Okay.
So we wanted to make sure that, so it's not quite apples to apples between December and current, but the process, the services are consistent.
Okay, that's helpful. So it's a behavior change versus truly solely externally induced.
Yes.
And
Yes,
it was,
Okay.
the fee increase was $5 per ton. So the solid waste agency will be increasing the fee that we pay them $5 per ton for both recycling and garbage as we go into this next fiscal year. So it's a combination of behavior and the rate increase.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. Now I got it.
Did
Thanks.
you have a chance to ask all your questions? Okay, go ahead, Will.
Well, Amber had a presentation. She can do that, and then I can.
Wait, okay.
That's-
Amber's turn.
I can wait.
Hello. Just want to assure council, I have been involved in the meetings with SCS and our team for the last 6 months or so. Have talked to other communities and really looking at how we can roll this out and make this successful for the city. Looking at a centralized place on our website, FAQs, arming our staff, our council with the information that our residents need to make this decision. So certainly open to your ideas and suggestions, but we do have kind of a full communications plan developed. I'm working towards that rollout at the city showcase, and that will kind of start the process. And then residents will have until the June 15th timeframe to make their choices. But we really didn't want to get out ahead of having the rate information because that's kind of going to be the first question people have when they decide what's best for them. So.
And if I can jump in, one of the things that we've talked about is direct mailing postcard to those residents. We did have a check-in earlier this week with Councilman Jensen, Miskman, and Brandt. And one comment that was made is, well, you know, regular mail, people tend to throw away the postcard, so making sure that we're highlighting it for our residents. So we will be using all our communication tools. We will plan on having carts available at the library, City Hall, Lau Park, where folks are going to be so they can see it and make some informed decision for them. And then obviously within that 90 days have the ability to swap out if their initial selection doesn't work. But really try to make sure that we're hitting it. We've even talked about with the messenger, we got upcoming messenger that's getting ready to be published. We wanted to, we just talked about it again today, kind of make sure that we can hold it back a little bit to capture council's recommendations or council's ultimate decision on this, as well as the other utility rates, so that we can make sure we're hitting that in a very timely manner too. So Amber's got a robust plan, and we'll continue to evolve it. And you know, that's where council's been wonderful with sharing what you're hearing when you're talking to your constituents, so we can, if there's something that we're missing, we can add it in or adapt quickly. So.
Anything you want to add, Amber?
No.
Any questions for Amber? Go ahead.
Yeah, while you're up there. So I think having the messenger come out is going to be the most important piece out there to roll out this program. So when we have all of these all the messaging going out, is it going to include the change in the new rates?
Yes, that
What
would,
they'll be?
yes.
I think that's important. Again, a lot of people, I was not aware of the number of people using the yard waste. But for example, if I'm taking the garbage and recycling, which that's going to be kind of standard for every household. But if I want to do an opt-in for the yard waste, I think it's very important people understand what that total cost is going to be, so that they are not surprised or shocked later on, because going from the $20 to the $35, I want to make sure they understand what that impact will be if they opt in for the yard waste. So I trust your messaging. I think it's having the carts available at multiple spots and areas is excellent as well. So I got complete confidence you're going to have a great plan. So
No pressure, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, Will?
Thank you, Amber. I have a bunch of questions I wrote down. They're not in any particular order, so I might jump around. Well, the first comment / question is, when you say 30% use yard waste consistently, I would be one that doesn't use it consistently, because some weeks I don't have time to be out in the yard doing yard work, and then maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe it's 4 weeks before I do, and then I have 3 or 4 or 5 cans of yard waste to get picked up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way I could put that in my little car and take it to the yard waste, like, you know, yes,
Compost
you know,
site.
the compost. Thank you.
Yep.
I couldn't think of the word. So just that 30% use it consistently means, sorry to say, it doesn't mean anything to me, because a lot of people probably don't use it consistently. My whole block, I mean, everyone's always putting stuff out, not every week, but everyone is putting stuff out at some point.
Mm-hmm.
So will that $10 a month fee for yard waste be 12 months out of the year, or will you not get charged when you're not using the service?
So
When there is no pickup?
we talked about, do we do an annual fee? Do we, how is that going to be? And so we sort of elected to, all the other fees are monthly. Let's just do it as a monthly fee rather than, it's $120 for the annual tag. That's basically what it is. That said, I think there's also an opportunity if the city wanted to. I don't think you're gonna have collection the entire year, but communities are starting to stretch out when they provide yard waste collection services. So rather than ending it November 15th or something like that, they're realizing that, boy, I wish we would have been able to collect it for an additional month.
Or start early like we did this year?
Right.
That's on the brain.
Yeah. So, next question was, if people are opting in, and can you opt in and out, or is it just you opt in, you're in it? For yard waste?
Yes, you can opt out. I mean, so at some point I opt in for that service. And there's a whole bunch of different ways that people can opt out. You might move out of the community, then I move into your home and there are these containers. So we've talked through that policy of how do you set up services, and I don't even know what these containers are. Do I need yard waste? I'm not even sure. So their time period starts of that 90 days to figure out, well, you need to figure out what you need. So there's got to be a time period for that.
So if someone is new to the neighborhood or new to Marion and they get into a house and there is no yard waste service,
Right.
they can opt in and it doesn't cost them $75?
Right. So they've got
Get that 90 days.
they've got that time period.
Okay. And then,
The other thing of you opting in and out, so we're working on reviewing the ordinances and the policies so that we don't have a situation where I want to opt in for the yard waste just for this month. In the sense, what would happen is you'd be charged $75, right, for that cart delivery, and then that $10 for that month. So the thought is for the $85 that you spent, you probably could have hired someone else to do it cheaper for you. But then you're sort of set up in that service. So we'll need to work on the policies to make sure that it's not a stop and start situation. But I think the $75 is a disincentive for someone to doing that 3 or 4 times.
concern I would have for that too is that if people are opting in and out, you're constantly having to reroute the truck every week.
Yeah.
Because
Yep.
new members in, new people out. I mean,
Yep.
And if I can jump in, I think that's an important concept about this rollout, this program, is that, as Jeff said, it's altering behavior. We're trying to pick up the efficiencies, improve safety. And so, we were having a conversation just the other day about the yard waste, and well, we could do that, but now we're losing all the efficiencies and all the positives gained by the automated service. And then that's going to add cost and then add opportunity. So it is a shift in the mindset on how we are using it. Even with the containers and the tags and all that. So it goes back to the point that Councilman Jensen was mentioning about the importance of the communication out, that this is what the service is, this is how much it's going to cost, and this is how it costs, but here's how to better utilize it so it is as efficient as possible for our residents.
yeah.
And I think with the education, I probably have said this at previous meetings, but I'll continue to say it, is that, the sort of the eyes of the world will be on this program. It's something that everybody touches on a weekly basis. So, one of the council members said that it's one of the utilities that everyone sees every week. And so it's a pretty visible program. Well, it's going to be the most visible it's ever been because this is a significant change. And so this is why we've spent a lot of time in working through policies, procedures to answer these questions behind the scenes so that they can be ready to be answered. And I think the communication, but then also whoever's answering that phone, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions, and making sure that that person is geared up as well is important.
Not opting in, but changing the sizes. So that first 90 days, can you get 2 different sizes? So if you get the standard to begin with and then you decide, I want smaller trash, but the larger recycle, you can just do one,
Yes.
so you can have different.
Yep, it
okay.
doesn't have to be, well, this is what you had, it's a complete swap out. Yep.
Gotcha. And then will the cart stay with properties like recycling does now? So if I move, I leave my carts?
Yes, they are property of the city, so they stay where
Property.
the service is provided.
And then why is it only one extra bag a week for one tag? Cause
So-
they're already getting out of the truck to get the one bag.
So the communication with that will be, and this is kind of in communication with the staff that you've got with Cedar Rapids about how they handle that. And so that extra bag is required to be on top of the cart. So as they pick it up, they're cycling the cart, that bag slides into the truck, and then the rest of the contents
Oh,
of
so
the
they're
cart
not getting out.
also slide in, so they're not getting out.
Using the system or. It's the automation and the benefits with that and the elimination of any opportunities for workman's comp and.
Sure.
Also, the study that we did, we spent a lot of time on the cart size availability. And through all the studies to try and figure out, well, how much capacity do we need to provide for garbage to accommodate most of the residents? And it was 9 out of 10 residents are going to consistently be serviced more. They're going to have more capacity than they're likely going to be able to use with garbage. So that extra bag, because they're limited to the 32 gallons now, well, they're going to have potentially twice as much capacity. So the likelihood of them having that extra bag to be collected will be minimized. And the one more thing to add there, if they did have more than the container, then there still would be the opportunity to have the special pickup.
Right. Is that 40 right now? Yes, okay. Is glass being thought of as still gonna stay? Like, cause driving around Cedar Rapids, you see people have little can or box of glass sitting next to their garbage cans, which obviously they're getting out of the truck to take care of that. Or unless it's some other vehicle that comes by and picks it up, I don't know. So we will still not do glass. That's
Correct,
unit.
that would still be at the drop-off facility.
Okay, okay. I think that was all of mine. I might come up with more.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Can you keep that so we can do the FAQ off of your
Yeah.
notes?
Right.
Anyone else? Do you have anything else?
I appreciate your time tonight, and I really appreciate all the questions. And I'll echo what Ryan said. The question that you're asking, appreciate that it's your constituents that are it helps to develop the communications, and it helps us to really dive into, we really need to look at the policies so that we have that answer ready to go. So appreciate it. Appreciate your time. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor,
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Amber.
Mayor, Sarah has a question.
Oh, Sarah, sorry, hold on, please. We have
No,
one
it's not really a
question.
question. It's just
Sarah,
more of
I'm
a.
sorry that I'm not recalling your virtual.
No, I'm just listening, and this is a problem. So, that's on me. The only statement I have really is I appreciate all of this. I'm aligned with the conversation on the shocking increase in cost. And, I just worry that we incentivize people into not participating in programs, and we end up with garbage and things around because people don't want to pay or don't want to deal with it. And then we start having junk dumped that we have to go pick up anyway or deal with because people aren't wanting to pay this or can't pay it. So I don't want to price us out of a service that keeps our community clean. That's all.
So is your concern the yard waste, Sarah?
Yeah, I just think that, and I think the jump in recycling, I know it's not all on us, but people come right down to it. What are they going to pay for? But the yard waste thing, I appreciated Will's comments on that. Is it year round? Is it not? How's this going to work? We're the same way. There's sometimes I use a lot and sometimes I don't. So,
Yep.
it's a startling figure when we've got other increases coming up with folks, and it's just a little bit here and a little bit there in a time when people don't have that little bits to be going up all over the place. That ends up being a lot. So that's it. Thank you all.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I wasn't going to bring this up, but Sarah brought it back up again, so I was just going to ask the question. I utilize our drive-up service as well on the weekends. Do we know what our full capacity is on that? If we do find the trends going towards more people? I've gone out there several times and there's 5 or 6 cars lined up, backed up, because they are using that as more. And if we go to a nominal fee for that, where are we at on that? Do we feel comfortable that we can take on that additional per car flow out there? Or maybe we haven't thought about that side of it yet? Just a general question.
So just so you're aware, the east side of 44th will be the new likely spot for that. And so with that, we're doing new layouts and stuff with that. So
And
further
when's that
discussion,
going to come online, Mike?
that's to be determined because there'll have to be a building and everything else. So for now, we'll have to operate where we're at. But
Right.
eventually that we're starting to look at concepts for future build out.
Right. Okay. So my question still stands. So when this does roll out, right now we get 2 cars parked there, one next to the cardboard recycling and that, because they're trying to it's just not set up very good. I mean, you go out there, 2 cars, people get out of their cars and all their 6 cars backed up there because somebody's trying to dump glass, somebody's trying to dump cardboard. I'm just anticipating the devil's advocate here of saying if we go to that additional fee for the recycling, we do offer it for free out there. People, I think, are going to start bulking up and taking it out there. So I'm just, I know in my mind how it's going to work. I'm just bringing it up for public knowledge. So,
But
thanks.
wait, you can't opt out of recycling though.
No,
Only the yard waste.
right. So if
Oh.
you're receiving service, you'll receive a garbage cart and a recycling cart. And in fact, the recycling cart will be more capacity than you likely currently have at your household.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. I did not realize that you could not opt out of the recycling. We keep bringing up yard waste, which in my mind, I don't use yard waste either, but with the rain that we're going to have, people are going to be mowing their yards every 3 days and they're going to be over capacity. And then you get to August and nobody's going to be using yard waste. So in my mind, I've already put that out of there. So I'm just dealing with garbage and recycling in my mind. And that's right. So if you can't opt out, my point's mute. So thanks.
Go ahead, Will, and then Steve has another question.
Sarah brought, with Sarah's comment, that made me think that, there might be a lot of people that will not opt into yard waste because that's $120 a year that they can't afford. And is that going to cause, she was talking about garbage, but if someone can't dispose of their yard waste, then down limbs or leaves or whatnot, because they're not opted in and they don't have a way to actually physically take anything out to the compost area, that could cause unsightly yards, other than garbage, unsightly, but just tall grass because they don't want to mow because they have no way to it could cause an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just one more quick suggestion. This is really for the city. As we finalize whatever the rates are, it might be good for us to have the rates for the comparable cities available to us after this is all finalized. At least that'll give us at least some comparison of how we compare to the other cities, and we can at least hopefully make a statement that, hey, we're still efficient and we're still doing it in a very good job of this cost-wise compared to other cities. So hopefully that's what that picture will show.
Yeah, and I would say, I think what Ryan said it really well in the beginning, that this is an enterprise fund. So not all the services are. And so they might have some additional subsidies that don't go to it, but the rates for comparable services range anywhere between $10 to $27 a month. And then there's all kinds of different fees for carts, cart sizes. So it ranges. So it can't always be directly comparable, but we do have the data that can be presented as to these are the rates that the other communities are providing and the services that are associated with those fees. Yeah, you bet.
We'll have one more question.
I'd be curious to see the comparison of the enterprise fund with a $10 opt-in fee and without a $10 opt-in fee. What happens to the fund? I know we don't have it now, but if that's something we could see.
Are you
We
meaning?
didn't have a $10 opt-in fee
Basically, pick up
Everyone-
yard waste for free.
Yes.
Or don't charge the
continually,
$10.
or
Yeah.
$5 instead of $10. I mean, that type of thing. I know you don't have it right now.
Well, and that's, the presentation we're gonna show next on utility rates is gonna become an annual thing as part of the budget process. So we don't have that now because we don't have the utilization, we don't have the data to show who's using it and who's not. And one of the things that Michael Maloney is gonna touch on this too, is that when we look at the utility rates, have they been established accurately to cover the cost of providing that service? So anything looking backwards, one, we don't have the data on utilization. We have the field data that showed the 30%. Did you say 30% consistently? 30% consistently. But in terms of how to break that cost out, we don't have that data. So anything, once this gets implemented, we'd be able to review that and scrutinize the data because we'll have it, we'll have who's opting in, we'll have that data. And then as part of the annual review, we'll be able to do it.
So that $10 a month is kind of a estimate of what it may cost.
It's primarily covering the cost of actually collecting it. So around $280 some thousand to collect the material. So someone driving around with that truck.
Is that based off 30% households?
It's yes, yeah, because we set up, well, how many households would we have and how much do we need to charge? And how much do we need to charge was somewhere between $8 and $12. And so we don't know how many people are going to opt in to participate in the program to help cover the cost of that. So the cost is pretty fixed. As we add more houses, there's more cost. If no one participates in it, then, or if very few people participate in it, then it's not the full $280,000. That said, you still have the cost of a dedicated truck and a dedicated crew to provide that service. The other thing we talked about is, okay, so maybe there isn't an opt-in. Maybe everyone gets a yard waste cart or has the opportunity to do that. That's a pretty big capital investment for the small amount of participation that you had. And so the base rate is paying for the base services for everyone to participate in. And if I want an extra service where someone's coming to my curb, then okay, we've got to cover that $280,000 some in those participants. The yard waste site and operations is paid for in the base rate. So that's available to everyone. Did I get that?
Yeah.
Anything to add?
Yes, I mean, I was ultimately going to say the cost is the cost. What that means is if you're like, hey, I want to subsidize and not charge what the cost is, that ultimately means that we would need to either increase that garbage and recycling weekly service rate from 25 to something greater, or you start to run in the red as far as your operating costs are concerned, and then we'll also be in trouble with our loan covenants that we have with our bonds that are in place.
But if you're charging $10 for 30% of the households versus 100% of the households paying $1, I don't know the statistic there, and everyone can opt in for free, then
That's where I said subsidizing, because then you've got people who aren't using it, paying for it for the people that do. And
Correct.
when you're saying,
It's
and
only
that's a
$1.
policy decision, council could make that decision.
Yeah, that's why I was kind of curious on the numbers, but if we don't have numbers yet, it's all kind of but I guess you could get numbers based off of if every household was paying versus only 30%.
But then you're also gonna have the cost to now run that service, and if everybody's included, our route drivers, how are they gonna know who's setting it out and who's not?
They don't now. They're just all running the route.
I'm sorry?
They don't now.
But that's the system and how the routes are set up and the automation changes how everything is done. So now, and that's why, if Jeff, you can explain it better, the cost is capturing the dedication of the staff person to go out and collect those from where it's opted in.
I get all that.
Yeah.
I get all that. I just, there's a difference between having only opting in and everyone pays $10 versus subsidizing it with everybody paying for it and it doesn't cost extra and everyone's can opt in.
But it likely would cost more on the back end because of the staff and the equipment needed to now service everybody.
Because you're saying right now, the staff and the equipment is based off of only 30% of the city getting service.
Is that?
And the cost is also, you know, for those containers too, rather than providing every household an additional yard waste container, we said,
Right.
okay, here's the backup and plus the maintenance carts that we're gonna need for that. And we built as much efficiency as we can, and all the carts are the same color. The lid is the only thing that changes, so we can move things around, so we've got some capacity there. But these carts are not cheap, as
I get
you
that.
know.
I think the last factor to consider as well is because they're assuming 30% are only participating, you've got less miles that you're running. You know, like right now, our yard waste truck is running the entire city because any household could be putting it out. Whereas if you're subscribed, you're only going to the subscribed houses. You're
understand all
not
that.
going every single mile that you would otherwise. So that's less miles on the vehicle, less hours for the employee,
Right.
less fuel.
I just, that 30% number just, it seems so low to me.
And so that was what we did with the time motion study when we followed the routes, you know, we counted all the people that participated that particular week. And then talking with staff, well, what is the average for the year? Yeah, you're right. When it's a free program and I can go to the hardware store and get as many yard waste bags as possible and I can set it all out and it's free, I don't really think about it. We're, as Ryan has said, we're working to change behavior so that we can make these programs as efficient and as equitably as possible.
And the here and now, I mean, we're starting this program, which is going to be completely new for our community. What is good about this is now we will be in a position where we will have more data. I heard guesstimate whispered over to my left not too long ago. So a lot of what we've been working on is building the finances, the budget, the monitoring and the analysis of our operations so that year over year, we're looking at it and we can make those adjustments. We can have more precise data to share with council. So you're able to make those informed decisions instead of saying, well, you know, 30% consistently. That's the best we can do based on that study that we've done, because we don't have those records. And so now as we build this, we will be able to systematically review it, update it, and better monitor it.
So the yard waste question, obviously I've got to, you know, soak through this over the next week or so. Here's my hypothesis. There are times in the growing season where there are weeks that perhaps substantially less, or let's say 30% of our residents put stuff out. But isn't there then corresponding timeframes, let's say in the fall, when residents more than 30% put materials out for the yard service? In other words, raking leaves, trimming bushes, whatever that's going on, maybe early spring and later in the fall, we're running at, say, 60%. Is there that within the confines of a growing season, is there that variation?
Yes and no. I mean, it depends.
Matt, would you might come to the microphone? Thanks. Because the meeting's recorded, so thank you.
Yes and no. I mean, like last year, it was very minimal. So there was a lot of drive time just because we're servicing everybody. So, I mean, we keep track of the yard waste weights. So we kind of know what each season's like. yes, as far as the fall, you asked, the fall's a little heavier, but since derecho, that number's gone way down just because there's not as many leaves in the older part of town, so that's actually dropped tremendously. Cause there were times before derecho where come that fall time, we would have 2 yard waste trucks just because it was so heavy, where we haven't done that post derecho. So I would say most of our yard waste now comes from grass, people that do bag their stuff. So again, that depends on the year. Obviously, a week or two from now, it's probably gonna be pretty thick, but come June, July, August, if it was like last year, there's nothing,
Right.
so.
Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Just that perspective is
Yeah.
valuable. I appreciate that.
I don't know if this creates an opportunity to educate people on alternatives, like not bagging the grass or mulching in your own yard or,
Yep.
you know, I mean, at least it'd be something that we could offer. And I know Will says there's a,
April 13th, Saturday, April 13th at the library.
Yeah.
There's a 2-hour class. We got a couple people that are presenting here in the audience, so. I think it's 2 o'clock, 1 o'clock, about composting and being green at home.
Great.
okay, anything else?
April 18th is when this will be coming back to council, so you have some time to process it. If you got follow-up questions, let us know. But we do plan on bringing this back April 18th so we can kind of stick to the timeline.
What is, just real quick, sorry, what does Cedar Rapids do? With yard waste?
So I believe it's built into their fee. I don't know if they're an
Part of the
enterprise.
fee.
It's part of their fee. But I think you have to opt in to have the cart. So I need to look up that data to be 100% sure, but I believe that's their program.
Interesting.
Not long after our last meeting about this, I was driving through Cedar Rapids and it was trash day in the neighborhood I was in, and there were plenty of houses that had 2, 3, I even saw 4 yard waste carts at the curb. So I don't.
So
I don't know what
they do have,
do.
if you wanted an extra cart, you pay for that extra cart. And that's one thing with this program, at least in my neck of the woods, we've got people that have 4 or 5 of those carts and they pay the annual sticker for it and they love it because they don't have to, in my community, I can also still use the bag. But these carts, once you have one, you'll never want to have anyone take it away from you and you'll track the thief down that took it.
Okay.
All right. Thank you all. Oh,
Sorry.
Yep.
Just to add about Cedar Rapids, I do know the fleet side of it. Their trucks are single stream, so one truck designated for garbage, one designated for recycling. I know they have their numbers as far as how many they pick up daily would be lower than ours. So Cedar Rapids, their garbage, they'll pick up their garbage, go dump it at the landfill, and then those same trucks go back on that same route and do yard waste. So they kind of 2-for-1 deal where for us, that would mean we would need more equipment that way.
Okay,
If that
thanks
makes
for
sense.
adding that. Thank you. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
All right. I think we have exhausted that one. Thank you. All right, the next item is
Evening.
discussion on utility rates, yes.
Sorry,
Oh, hi,
jumped
Brian.
in there. Evening. So on behalf of finance here, this is the next stage in our budget revamp process. So as you recall, we deconstructed our budget process. We deconstructed the CIP, so we built that back up. And this budget cycle, we're addressing our asset replacement schedule, which ties into the conversation that you just had about the solid waste trucks and all that kind of stuff. So this year, the process around the utility rate analysis has been in line with a couple of major initiatives. You've just heard about the solid waste study, and then so what we expect that to bring along with the Cedar Rapids wastewater treatment facility and the impact that that has on the sewer fund. So in the future, I think Ryan made this point earlier, in the future, this is a conversation that we will have during the budget process. We had a lot of work. I want to thank Michael Maloney with DA Davidson and the work that he did along with our finance team. So again, this is a conversation that we'll bring along with the work session. So it's a kind of a conversation in totality. So with that, I will turn it over to Michael Maloney with DA Davidson to present the utility rate analysis. And then we can have any questions that you have for our finance team and Michael after that.
Welcome, Michael.
Hi, folks. Thanks, Brian, for the introduction. If we just go to the next slide, I'll do a quick overview of what we're going to cover today. You know, I think we had some teasers here in the solid waste study review, but we're going to cover 4 enterprise funds today. And the goal today is to be thorough but efficient. As Brian mentioned, this is going to be part of the ongoing budget process, but much of the content that we're going to be talking about today were items that we reviewed as part of the public service facility financing discussion. So some of this may be familiar to some of you on council and in the public today. I'm just going to reiterate something that's come up a couple times already. These are enterprise funds, so we're trying to make sure that rates and charges are set sufficiently to cover the operating and long-term capital needs of each of the systems with a sustainable focus on the future financial capacity. So that's the big picture framing here. Let's jump into it by starting with sanitary sewer, 2 slides ahead. So just an overview here. I'm not going to read every bullet point off the slides, but the overall concepts as we review the sanitary sewer fund are really going to be focused about making sure that the capital needs of the system are covered while we keep an eye on obviously operating costs. I think we are all aware and have discussed before that the treatment through a partnership with Cedar Rapids is going to drive those operating costs, which we've talked about in the past. But we're also now shifting to talk about where those anticipated capital costs from Cedar Rapids will be, and that'll be a highlight and focus of this discussion today. Let's go back to the next slide here on 5. So just a little bit of context here for you. I like to update with the Ames water rate report, which covers both water and sewer. It's a survey of the communities over 10,000 population for their service territories here in Iowa. I don't have a copy of the 2023 report yet. It's not out publicly. I expect that'll be available soon. This is something we've shared with staff before, but want to be clear that the average residential monthly bill for the city's sewer was right in the middle of the pack here historically. And this is just summarizing some of the items we've hit on before, which those fixed non-variable charges for the system are really limited, a small % of the total overall bill, and just want to be mindful of that as we think about going forward. The last time we did adjust rates here at the city was 2 years ago in the spring of 2022. The reason for no adjustment last year, despite the necessary financing for the public service facility, just a reminder, I'm sure staff has hit on this subsequent to the last time I visited with you folks, was the reduction in the Cedar Rapids treatment costs. So with that in mind, it helped buffer where our revenue requirements were and made the adjustments that were made 2 years ago sustainable through last fiscal year. So continuing some of the work that's been looked at over the last couple of years. Let's go to the next slide. So from this standpoint here, I always try to reiterate this. I've got this slide repeated a couple times. We've hit on some of these items in talking about the solid waste study earlier tonight, but the 2 items that we're focused on in developing these models and analysis are really signals of both short and long-term liquidity. So as Leanne had mentioned previously, when an enterprise fund has related revenue debt that it needs to support in addition to its operating and capital needs, we are pledging to bondholders that we're going to maintain adequate net revenue coverage. This is something we've reviewed with council historically, but always like to provide as a reminder when we talk about rate setting. That debt service coverage consideration is really the signal of long-term liquidity. Then from a short-term liquidity, I like to think about days cash on hand as kind of our rainy day funds, if you were. And really the bare minimum for that should be maintained at 90 days cash on hand. Historically, the city's been targeting something more in the 120-day range, 30 to 35% of operating expenditures. But just with growing costs for capital needs, even for smaller enterprise funds, having a baseline dollar, target out there around $1 million or $2 million, depending on the size of the fund, may make sense as well to just make sure we're going to be sustainable into the future from a financial standpoint. Let's go to slide 7 with just a little bit of a historical look on the sewer fund. Try to update this every year for folks. One of the things that you'll note is that we did work over the last 2 years to make sure that we were going to be in place to be able to afford the public service facility related debt payments. Those won't come online until fiscal 24, which we're now wrapping up for this year. Since this is a historical look on the audited financials, that debt hasn't come online in here, which is why the financial performance looks as robust as it did for fiscal 23. So this is always backward looking while our planning is on a forward looking basis, but we were working to get in that right place so that we can maintain and sustain the system on a financial basis on a go forward. Let's go to slide 8. So just trying to kind of summarize this base case projection. And I think the important piece here is really the Cedar Rapids future treatment projects. This information's been shared with council before, but I think it's important for us to be clear about. The estimate for the near-term project should be around fiscal 27. It's about a $250 million project for the city of Cedar Rapids. Of that, just under 10% is the estimate for the city's share of the capital needs. So working from that, and that agreement will need to be worked out between the city and Cedar Rapids, but working on that as our baseline for what those capital needs will be for the city is how we've started to identify where we're going to need to go from a revenue requirement standpoint. A little bit farther down in the future, the main lift element of their projects in fiscal 34 or so is estimated another 130 million, and the city share estimates a little bit more than 10% on that piece. So as we think about those, one of the things we want to do is make sure we're maintaining our rates and charges adequately year over year to fund our near, mid, and long-term needs so that we don't have any type of shock type rate increases. Hopefully we can keep it modest and along the lines of cost of living type adjustments on a go forward basis. And that's the value of incorporating this type of work into the annual budget process for the city. I think just kind of wrapping up on the next slide, where we're talking about going from a rate adjustment standpoint, there's 2 elements here. Like we said, we're trying to plan for the future and look on a multi-year basis, but the adjustment of those rates, tilting that in the recommendation from staff here more towards the fixed costs. If you just think about what our revenue requirements are going to be in the future, our expenses are going to be comprised of some relatively large fixed amounts, the related debt on the various capital needs of the system, as well as the annual operating costs paid to Cedar Rapids for treatment. So with those costs growing, aligning more of the fixed rate beyond the current 11% to something higher than that is going to create less volatility in the year-to-year flow information and how that impacts our overall revenues realized. Just want to be clear, always try to reiterate this. It's never a set it and forget it on the enterprise funds. We want to be analyzing these year to year with a real focus. Hey, just want to maintain cost of living type adjustments, hopefully into the future, and avoid those shock type increases that we talked about. So what does this look like? Let's go to the next slide. In terms of the sewer fund, the discussion here was moving the charges from that fixed element of $2 and $2, kind of a $4 monthly fixed rate, to $5 and $3, so an $8 fixed rate with no change on the variable charge. So the goal would be an extra $700,000 of additional revenue generated for the upcoming fiscal year. That's the theory here. And if you look farther out into the future, any type of additional adjustments really tie into those sort of cost of living type adjustments over the near term, as we obviously will need to continue to evaluate the expenditures, both capital and operating for the system. And obviously, as that Cedar Rapids project is bid and needs to be paid for, the financial impact of that, we've got estimates today that'll continue to be refined as well. So this is a decision for the council on how to implement this in the future. No decisions need to be made today, but we'll also continue to monitor this as we continue to move forward. The remaining sections are going to follow this sort of pattern, but I want to just pause here after the sanitary sewer side, one for any staff input and any questions that council might have at this time.
Thank you. Questions? No questions, Michael.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let's move to slide 12 then as we get into the solid waste utility. Not going to again read off every bullet point here, but I think the bold last bullet is the important piece here. The adjustments being discussed are being reviewed because the decisions made to date by council as part of the work by SCS. I think we've really gotten in the weeds in that in the prior segment already. So just going to be focused on the financial elements of that here today. So let's go to slide 13. Again, just, as part of the thought process, just want to be clear. It's the same story on solid waste as this for sanitary sewer in terms of thinking about we need to maintain our debt coverage that we've got on the outstanding debt related to public service facility, as well as those rainy day cash on hand. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on solid waste here today. Let's go to the next slide with that historical look, similar to what we just talked about for sanitary sewer. Again, things have been pretty healthy on the solid waste fund, but we do have a significant amount of capital needs as well as equipment replacement elements. We'll get into those details here shortly, but this snapshot again looks back over the last 5 audited financial years, finishing up fiscal 24, which will be the first time we have the new round of public service facility debt that came online last year to be paid. So just want to be clear, this was part of the ongoing process we've reviewed over the last couple of years and just continue to monitor this and make sure this looks healthy into the future. Let's go to the next slide. So one of the elements that we're talking about already today were the increased tonnage and tipping fees from the Cedar Rapids Lynn County Solid Waste Agency. So that had been a 5% increase in fiscal 23 and are increasing 19% for fiscal 25. The recycling element's about 23.5%. I think Leanne had mentioned those increases on a dollar basis at the end of the last segment. So those are pass-through costs the city needs to manage in addition to the capital needs, in addition to some of the changeovers that we're talking about in terms of long-term efficiencies for the system. So there was an adjustment on a modest level last year in fiscal 23 to just maintain the debt coverage and cash reserves. One of the things that we want to point out here is that we'd like to try to keep those replacement funds active so that we can address those future capital and equipment needs on a pay-as-you-go basis and avoid additional bonding. So there's about $6.5 million over the next few years in the CIP and equipment replacement elements of this, and $2.2 million of replacement funds on hand are going to be applied to those costs. I think that's something staff's likely made you aware of, but I want to be clear that that's involved in this sort of revenue requirements discussion, analysis, and forward planning when we look at the rates. Let's go to the next slide. So I think this has already been hit on by SCS. The recommendation of $25 for the residential monthly per unit cost that covers both garbage and recycling. A $5 fee across all categories is the element here. I know at the end of the last segment, we talked about being able to update that with better and additional data next year. But I just want to remind folks something that we've talked about the last couple years when reviewing the solid waste utility, which is that the post-derecho kind of tonnage disposal levels create what I'd call kind of noise within some of that data. So we're working with the best information that we have as we plan to what that will be. But each year as this is updated, we look at actual tonnage, actual population growth, the number of users, and just make sure we're hitting our marks from a revenue requirement standpoint into the future. So again, I want to be clear here, any rate adjustments that are going to be identified and made in the near future, there's going to be a need as we continue to have pass-through costs from the solid waste agency, as we continue to refine what we need to do from an operating and capital standpoint. This is something that'll come back to you going forward. So what does this look like on rates? Let's go to slide 17. Overall, right now, we have that $5 across the board element put in, and this is again, garbage and recycling. The future increase in 26 is kind of a placeholder, as we've got some inflationary considerations on the operating side that are baked into the model. We'll review this again next year with updated tonnage information and data from the program that'll be in place. And at that point, we can evaluate about any of the future years. So I just want to be clear, we're only talking about the fiscal 25 rate adjustments at this time. Things can change based on that feedback. The goal of this would be to generate about $500,000 in additional revenue for the full fiscal year. And again, this is not something that the council needs to make a decision on tonight, but this is the recommendation from staff, and how this is actually implemented on a go-forward basis is subject to discussion. I know we just talked a lot about solid waste, but I'm going to pause here again just to see if there's any questions or comments from staff or the council.
I wanted to point out one thing, if you don't mind. When it comes to solid waste and timing, and when do you increase the rate versus when we go to automated collection? It's already been shared in the previous presentation that we're looking at going to automated collection in September timeframe. When it comes to changing the rate, the staff's recommendation is that we change the rate from 20 to 25 around July, and then do the transition later, because as SCS shared in today's numbers, the cost is $21.21 per household right now, and we're only charging 20. So as we're at right now, we're not charging enough to cover the cost, and the equipment needs that we have are substantial. And so if we did have any additional money, if you would say, it would help us buy down the equipment or the balloon note that we have on the facility.
Okay, go ahead, Grant.
Yeah.
Steve.
I'm not sure who best can answer this question, but you'll figure it out. A few slides back, it was shown that for our current budget, we have 510 days of cash on hand for solid waste. What's a reason, and I think it was as low as 0 days historically. What's a reasonable number?
Sure. I want to be clear about this, and I'm pulling up the actual
Yeah,
model
that's-
on that information. So
Right.
one of the things that we try to target in here, Grant, over the long time is, or Councilmember Harper, sorry, over the long term is making sure that we've got sustainability on those two metrics, the debt coverage that Leanne mentioned before and that we covered on the liquidity slide, and then also the days cash on hand. So our target for that in each one of the enterprise models right now is to finish the year between 30 and 35% over the long term. So that's each year making sure that we've got that level of solvency that's got those rainy day funds on hand. That's going to ebb and flow depending on things like our capital replacement schedule, if we've got some pay-as-you-go capital needs that are in there. And we'll typically budget or manipulate that a little bit with some of the replacement funds that we might have. Now, if you recall, and I'm sure council's heard this from staff already, so I'm probably rehashing, but we've got those costs coming up in the next couple fiscal years that are going to be paid from those set aside funds. So to allow us to have some of those pay-as-you-go dollars applied, it's going to show a larger balance in the near term. That's really mitigated over the long term in our projection here, where we are just going to be at that 30 to 35% unrestricted cash range overall, and not too high, not too low from that standpoint, trying to have a Goldilocks scenario there. Does that answer your question, Councilmember Harper?
Yes, it does. So that'll be a variable number based on anticipated current needs and future needs.
Yep, and we've got that plugged in and aligned with some of those, with all of your CIP and then equipment replacement elements.
Okay, so that's not a hard, we're gonna maintain it at X, whatever.
No, it's the weakness of having an audit be a snapshot in time, if that makes sense.
All right, thanks for educating me.
Yeah, and you have something to add to that?
Great
Well, I was just
question.
going to add, I know that Michael mentioned the capital, but we just came off the conversation with SCS. We've got about 2.95 million that we're going to have to pay for the fleet. The cart procurement's estimated at 1.8 million. So while it looks like there's a lot of days cash there, that money is essentially accounted for with the implementation of this automated collection.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna tie a bow on that, Leanne. Great point. Councilmember Harper, this wasn't like a long-term element or, oh, it's gonna draw down over multiple, years and years. It's like within the next year or two, Leanne, would you agree on that?
Within the next 6 months is the majority
Yeah.
of that. I mean, that doesn't
Depending on
mean
how
we're
you
gonna-
want to call calendar year, fiscal year. Exactly. It's
One
coming
other-
soon. Yeah.
One other large one I can mention is we do need to replace our horizontal grinder in the next 2 years. That's a $1.3 million investment. So these are the types of items that we're not wanting to finance. We're wanting to pay cash for.
Steve?
Yeah, Michael, Steve Jensen here. So when I looked at your full set of projections, well, what you did, you kind of explained a little bit on why your rate for 25, 26 is fixed for future years. But on all the other enterprise funds, you showed at least some modest increase for all your projected future years. And this one you did not. And then the result of that is in 29, 30, then you start running into problems with your debt service and your cash flow. So I'm just curious, even though we know the rates aren't finally approved, why you didn't at least show some anticipated or needed incremental rate, just so those two numbers are healthy and what it might take to keep it healthy by 29, 30.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I want to be clear that we're evaluating each one of these independently. So there's always going to be a little bit of different method to the madness. If you go back to what we talked about on the public service facility, one element of that was the way we structured the solid waste elements of that debt. And then I think we've hit on this already in terms of the discussion we just had with SCS, is that we've got some more moving pieces right now on the solid waste fund, right? There's a new dynamic in terms of how collections are going to work. We're going to continue to update and analyze the tonnage data. So while we want to be clear about what we've got going on in the near term based on our best expectations, the refinement of that over the next several years is going to lead to better projections in that midterm range. That's one piece. The second piece is in terms of evaluating the debt and the long-term elements of the debt. I think it's likely that if we've got better performance than expected, that would be used to pay down some of that debt sooner. If not, because of the length of the assets that were financed, the public service facility specifically, we'd probably look to refinance some of that debt when we get closer to that fiscal 30 period and create some relief from the cash flow standpoint at that time. That might be different than maybe the sanitary sewer fund, which may be in a position to retire some of that debt sooner without additional financing. So just based on how much known information we have and the dynamics of each enterprise fund, we're treating them a little bit differently each time. Great question.
So as we get more information in the next handful of months, then this is the one enterprise fund that'll probably get revised sooner than some of the others.
Yeah, I think we're going to look at them at least annually, but as that data comes in, you're gonna know more, and the results of this new implementation, that's going to have a lot to do with what's going to go on for the future.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Michael.
Mm-hmm.
No other questions at this time.
So I think we'll be accelerating a little bit here to the end. So stay with me, folks. I appreciate your attention and time. Let's go to the Stormwater Fund. The Stormwater Fund at this point, I know on the table for the city is going to be a Stormwater Master Plan. And that feedback, having worked on with communities that have also undertaken this process elsewhere, it's going to impact the decisions the council is going to make in terms of long-term operations and capital needs as well. So it'll obviously be a different set of feedback and a different enterprise fund, but want to think about this a little bit like the implementation for the future in terms of level of effort and providing service like you're coming out of with the SCS work on the solid waste side. So we know that's stay tuned over the next few years, but it's been part of the budget, part of what's implemented here for the fund review, and there'll be more to do on the stormwater fund in the future. Let's go to the next slide. I think we've seen this slide already. The one thing I'll note, and you will note here in the next couple slides, is there is no outstanding debt service for the stormwater fund at this time. So that element of the discussion kind of goes away here on slide 20, but we are trying to maintain, healthy cash balances and being able to address not only our CIP, but maybe the long-term needs that'll come out of the stormwater master plan as well. Let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned, the debt rows are zero here and are going to remain zero as it relates to anything on the public service facility financing. We'll talk about that next. I appreciate the days cash on hand look here in terms of the discussion we just had from a solid waste standpoint as well. That being said, I think it's pretty clear that there's going to be continued needs from the stormwater utility. And the programs that we have into the future, we want to just make sure we've got things in a place where we can afford to continue that level of effort on a go-forward basis without drawing down too far. Again, we're going to get new information from levels of effort for operations and capital in the future. We want to take steps in that direction, but that'll be refined in future years as well. Let's go to the next slide. So just the story here from the Stormwater Fund, you know, this is really going to be, again, covered with part of the master plan. I'm not trying to punt on this. I'm just saying that that's going to have the ultimate long-term direction. There really just hasn't been any impact on rates here for some time. So taking a step in the right direction to maintain where we need to be just with cost to operate the system and cover our existing capital plan is our goal for the near term. The target overall right now is a 50-cent per month adjustment of the service charge and 33 cents on the variable charge, the element on the stormwater rate ordinance. So that for residential users versus, you know, tip versus commercial users, you're gonna have different impacts based on the equivalent residential units. But the theory is about an 83 cents per month impact for a typical residential user overall. Now, if you go to the next slide, just what that would look like in terms of the elements of the bill. That move from $3.50 to $4 on the fixed service charges, and then $1.67 to $2. Again, this is on a monthly basis for the stormwater utility. The goal here is generating about $175,000 in additional revenue for the full fiscal year. Not to be the broken record, but again, this is a decision for council on how to implement staff recommendation, not having to make a decision at this time, but aligns with the budget planning that's been done to date for fiscal 25. Gonna pause there before wrapping up with a brief segment on urban forest, if there's any questions here on stormwater as well.
Questions?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Can you explain again why the increase when there's such a large amount? Is it for future projects? Is that what you said? I may have missed.
Yeah, it's twofold. Yep, no, you're good. It's twofold. One, it's on the operating expense growth. We continue to see a plan and a budget for operating expenses. We're trying to manage those costs as they continue to rise on an annual basis. It's plugged into the model, the fiscal 25 budget anticipation plus a 5% year-over-year operating expense anticipated growth rate. So keeping pace with those elements. And then the second part is the capital plan elements that are currently there, the storm sewer program, storm sewer reimbursement, and then the stormwater master plan, along with some vehicles and other equipment for the fund. Those that are already part of the CIP and equipment replacement are factored in here, and then they'll be covered on a pay-as-you-go basis. So between existing reserves and then the revenues generated by these increases and existing revenues, those are going to cover those operating costs, pay-as-you-go capital projects, and maintain the healthy reserve levels into the future.
Okay.
So let's wrap up with urban forest. There's really one goal here on the urban forest side. Obviously, it's an important facet, important enterprise fund for the community, especially for Marion. One of the things we want to do is just maintain that cash flow for the fund. So we've got our operating costs and the capital costs, like we've talked for the other utilities. We're not going to have bonding specifically to urban forests. So it's a little bit different here from that standpoint. We just want to make sure that this is going to be sustainable on a multi-year projection as well. Let's go to next slide, just on the historical performance. The days cash on hand here, I think, is a little bit misleading just because there are going to be significant costs, like we've talked about with the other funds, to be covered with pay-as-you-go needs in the near future. So making sure that that's covered and appropriately with any matching funds, grants, et cetera, things like that. we want to make sure we've got this to be solvent for those needs in the near future as programmed. So let's go to the next slide, slide 27. The steady revenue increases, this has seen rates move over the last several years from 225 per month to 350 per month. That combined with just the growth in the population, we've seen this revenue stream being able to support the projects that are for the betterment of the community. So anything that we do in the future just to maintain that overall cash flow. And right now, there's no plan for an adjustment for fiscal 25. You know, if there's additional levels of effort or a different thought process here, that's obviously something that can be included. But at this time, there's no anticipated adjustment on the urban forest fund. So that's kind of the wrap up on urban forest. I don't know if there's any questions there, but I've just got two wrap up slides that kind of take the rate impact on an overall basis, and we can kind of go from there. So let's go to slide 28. So just thinking about this big picture, and I'm backing out the elements from the water separate board of trustees. We talked a little about those folks at the start of the presentation or start of the session today, but just on the city council governed elements here that we've discussed, the total requested increases would be about $9.83 per month for the typical residential customers. I want to highlight a couple things here. You know, since fiscal 21, the overall rate increases to these enterprises would then average, if these are implemented by council, about 6.4% per year. It's, again, not counting water. Just for context, CPI, which is a measure of inflation over that same period, was about 5.8% per year. So just keeping up with inflation from that standpoint. I also wanted to highlight that in the period of review, just going back to fiscal 18 through its program through fiscal 30 and the CIP and equipment replacement, this would allow the city to have made over $50 million of capital investments in the community from these enterprise funds. So that's not just repair and replacement and maintenance, but it's improvement of the assets that each of these enterprise funds have for the benefit of the community in the future. So that's sort of the big picture. And I just want to reiterate, this is something we're going to continue to look back on. We've got multi-years of this review to date. It's going to be part of the budget process going forward as well. We want to make sure we're getting those rates and charges sufficient to meet our revenue requirements now, but also have that multi-year view to make sure that we're avoiding some of those shock type rate adjustments in the future for any of the funds. And then just a graphical look on slide 29, just a little bit about sort of a typical monthly bill for a customer. And I just plugged in 4,000 gallons of water usage. That's a pretty typical level that we see on the residential side for water, which then drives the sewer usage as well. And you can see that balance between the two. And this does incorporate the water element as well, but does not include any related taxes. So just wanted to have this for some context for folks. I'm happy to answer any questions. I want to return the favor and just thank Brian and Leanne and finance staff. I appreciate this as part of the budget process, but this is, you know, going on at the same time those folks are working on finalizing the budget elements. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of back and forth, and they're liaising with the other departments as well. So just want to know this is extra effort and it's for the betterment of the city, especially in the long term, to make sure these rates stay consistent and avoid the type of shocks that we look for in the future. Any questions?
And I'd just like to add in summary, as we're looking at these rates, these are all being driven by some of the major initiatives of the city. And you look at sanitary sewer, that O&M, the operations and maintenance agreement we have with Cedar Rapids, some of those major capital investments are a large portion of what are driving those rates. The stormwater, we've got that stormwater master plan we're looking at in these coming years. The garbage, that automated collection we're working on, urban forest, we're also doing that reforestation plan. So this is all long-term planning that is coming to fruition, and the facility, the public service facility, where we've also got some continued build out there as well.
Steve? Yeah, I think two comments. If you go back to the previous slide, and this maybe Amber consider a few pieces off of this slide to me that really jumped out to me. One is the second bullet where it said our average would be 6.4% versus inflation 5.8. So I think that makes it sound like we're a lot better in with these rates are keeping up with inflation or just slightly over inflation. And the other piece is the third bullet point, and that's what you just talked about, Leanne. I think we need to take a little more credit on why we're doing this, and that we're going to be doing $50 million in total capital investments in the future. and maybe continue to identify what those are and why they're being done. So all of this is, if you start looking at all of that in the totality, while it seems like a pretty high increase in maybe the next year, as you look at it in those two perspectives, we're doing a lot and maybe not doing it as that far over inflation for that period of time, so.
Well, kind of along that same theme, actually, Amber, too, the last bullet there, the goal to avoid shock type adjustments in the future, that we're being as proactive as we can and really managing the total complexion of our spend, capital and operating. And so taking the surprise out of it, I think that's an important element that can be appreciated by anybody. So I guess if we can get copies of this slide deck, that would be great.
Go ahead.
So just to clarify, these would all take effect July 1, 2024, correct?
Yes.
And then kind of to backtrack, if there was an opt-in $10 fee for yard waste, would that take effect in September when the program starts, or would that be July 1 also?
That would be in September with the program rollout, and that includes the change to the ordinance and the policy. And so there's a lot of steps that would occur between now and that timeframe.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor,
Go
if I can, just, I appreciated Councilman Jensen's comments about the totality of things. And I just, as we're talking about enterprise funds and making sure we have the rates to cover the cost of operations, I want to assure everybody, and I know council's aware of a lot of the initiatives that we've been undertaking to make sure that our operating expenses are appropriate, and that we're finding ways to continue to evaluate those and make sure that whether it's through staffing reorganization, the structure, different types of programs that we're offering internally as well as externally, that we're constantly reviewing those to make sure that we are being as fiscally responsible with our residents' dollars. So that is something that I think is important to share with the viewing audience at home. The other thing too, I appreciated Councilman Harper's comment about being proactive, and that is one of the things as it relates to the stormwater utility. We talk about the stormwater master planning. We have the HDR study as it relates to the sanitary sewer. We've got the pavement indexing for our road network. The stormwater master plan will help us identify and be much more proactive on the projects that we need to implement in order to handle the increase of stormwater that comes with a growing community. The other benefit with that is we know these areas and we can plan them. Now we can better sync them up with other capital projects so that we're being much more efficient with our time and those dollars as we're working to reinvest in our community. So I know we're showing a lot of numbers, and this process is new. And this is part of our growing up as a community, to borrow some terminology from the mayor. And our goal is to have this type of analysis done as part of the budget process every year. So this is not a one and done thing. This is going to become part of our routine so that we are being as forward-looking as possible, that it is being wrapped up in the budget process. So council's getting and the community is getting everything all at once, and we're not piecemealing this throughout the year and trying to play catch up. So this is a shift. Again, we're growing up and we're implementing these types of things to make sure that our budget process is transparent, easily understood, it's thorough, and that we're collecting the data to make those informed decisions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, everybody.
Next item is the upcoming agenda review. First item that's marked for discussion is on the second page of the agenda, which is A7. Is there any item prior to A7 that anyone would like to discuss? Hey, Gary, A7?
Good afternoon. The fee that was in your council packet, was just omitted from the last, council meeting, the fees that were submitted. This is just putting those fees back in. They're supposed to be there, so we just wanted to get them back in there. So that's what this is.
Any questions on that?
Thanks.
Thanks, Gary. All right, next item is B1. John? Hi.
Good evening, council. I'm rely on Sean here. A lot of these changes were, we went up initially to meet Henderson on the chassis 1 through 8. A lot of the items were upgraded just for longevity of the truck and some safety items. One thing that was added was an overhead light, allowing the driver to know that the box was up. So I'll let Sean get into those details.
Yeah, good evening. Yeah, those changes that John was just alluding to were basically a couple safety changes that were gonna cost us another $415 per truck. Bringing our total from Henderson through this resolution, a change order for $4,565. The safety equipment also included relays for switch panels, which in the past we've had to heat up in the cabs before and had meltdowns on those. So one of our mechanics had actually gone with the fire department to look at one of their new trucks and did a walk around and saw this feature and thought that it'd be a good idea for us to do the same with ours to prevent any kind of smoke in our eyes going down the road while we're plowing with all of our lights on. So that would actually increase the equipment packages from $139,828 up to $140,243. So that's the first part of that resolution. The second part is an increase of $31,168 for 2 trucks that we still have left to purchase, truck 9 and 10. Those 2 trucks, it would be the additional equipment of a wing plow and a broom circuit added to each of those 2 trucks for a total of $62,336. This addition would actually allow us to utilize these trucks with the extra plows on some of the larger arterials to help increase our rate of completion. And also it would help in benching operations. Right now, we only have our motor grader that's capable of doing any kind of benching in, say, shoulder areas where we need to get the snow back for repeated snows that sometimes we see, or in drifted areas also. So that would be 2 additional trucks to help with those operations also. So that will also include on those 2 trucks a broom circuit. That broom circuit we have currently on one of our trucks now that's due to be replaced with this addition here. But we'll have one, actually 2. One will be a backup in case we have an issue with the truck, which we don't have that right now. But that broom circuit actually is a broom assembly that's on the front of our truck during gravel operations where we're grading shoulders and things like that. So we can actually broom the rock away and out of the roadway after the truck is through with a grader. So we'll have 2 trucks that will be allowed to be able to do that now too. So, and then the third part of our resolution there is the addition of another equipment change order from Henderson to truck number 11. That would be our last plow truck. Now that is actually going to be, we chose to split between 2 divisions, solid waste and road use. 25% of that will be road use responsibility and 75% will be for solid waste. Now this change would incorporate an equipment package including a hook lift hoist, V-box sander, dump body, and obviously a plow also. And that amount would be, an increase of $89,888. Now, as I mentioned, this additional combined, a road use and a solid waste truck into one unit. So, by using this truck in this way would allow road use, another truck for snow removal, sanding operations. And then solid waste would also use the truck for Monday large load pickups, or Tuesday brush pickups, and then hauling, recycled materials to their designated businesses. And then a dump body that way we would have here also would actually be used by both divisions for hauling just different materials at any time that we would need. But the nice thing about this hook lift being split is that the net effect for road use will be an actually deduction of $79,158 with this being split. So I think, are there any questions on this change order here so far, this resolution?
Questions? Go ahead.
Sean, can you just, the safety features on that first part of the change order for the 11 plow trucks, can you restate what that specific safety feature was?
Sure, we have two there. The first one is the relays to prevent overheating
Okay.
and the switch panel that's between the seats and the switches that are actually on a armrest for the plow controls. That change was $260 for each of those trucks. And that basically the relays would be ground triggered that way. And then the other half of that would be $155 per truck for the body up indicator that John alluded to. Just kind of a visual warning to the guys, yeah, your box is still up and may contact overhead
Okay.
issues.
Well, I was sensitive to the word safety features or the phrase, so I appreciate that. And I just think on that very last one you were outlining, what it sounds like to me is you're making an individual truck or chassis more usable for multiple reasons. So you're driving additional value out of that base investment.
Correct.
Okay.
And I believe going forward, we'll look into this a little more as some of these trucks start to cycle out at the end of their lifetime, actually introducing the same type of vehicle again to actually help out. It'll be other abilities moving forward. We can get flatbeds for these. I know at one time Councilman Jensen had inquired about leaf suction, kind of like Cedar Rapids does now. This truck would allow us to be able to put that piece of equipment on the back also. They're multifunctional trucks.
Yeah,
So,
great. Appreciate that. Thanks.
you bet.
Randy?
Sean, I had just a quick question. It was nice to see our trucks out in full force, with the plows. I didn't think we would see that this particular year. One thing that I did notice though is we have the beacons on the front and the back, but there's hardly any visible sight to those on the side. Has there been any talk about any modifications to those so that there would be marker indicators on the sides of those trucks? Because I witnessed those go by my office pretty much all day long, and I just kept looking at them and looking at them. And when you're coming up at a right angle to those trucks, because there's no light bars on them like a traditional, like we've seen in the past. But any conversation around that or any modifications, or was that even a consideration at all?
We haven't talked about anything moving forward at this point. Basically, the reason for removing those light bars out of the top was basically our trees or any other overhead obstacles we may encounter. Anytime we hit one of those, you're talking $1,200 to $2,500 light.
Right.
Every time. That could happen multiple times a night. If you've got a heavy snow and you've got limbs that are hanging down, you're likely to contact those headache rack mounted light bars. So that was our reasoning for putting them inside of the perimeter of that.
Right, I guess I was kind of thinking, like the DOT trucks, you see like a lot of lights around their spreaders and, sometimes they'll be on the box, sometimes they'll be on the chassis, as a side light indicators, but I was just curious. It was just one thing that just caught my attention, being with the fire department for the years that I have it, you're used to all those 360-degree lights around those when it came up on one from the site, it took me off guard. There was there was nothing visible from a flashing standpoint. All you could see were the headlights and reflection of the reflectors, but it was just a general question. I didn't know if that was any modifications in those change orders or not. So it was just a general question, but I appreciate it.
We do have strobes in each side of the headache rack there also, along with a sander light on the left-hand side of the truck. We did talk about putting one on the right-hand side to help illuminate a little more.
Come to think of it, the site I'm referring to would have been always on the passenger side. So that might have been what I was like, of course.
That could have been part of it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. But it was nice to see them out. They did a great job. It was fun to watch them kind of get some miles on them and watch them in service. So they're nice trucks. Hopefully they're panning out for you.
Yeah, they were excited to get them out for the first time, I think. Keep our fingers crossed we don't have to do it again tonight.
I can almost see everybody drawing cards to see who's going to get to drive this because I did see some of the old trucks out there yet. I can almost imagine the
There's a little
little,
arm wrestling
the
going on.
games that were being played. Yeah.
Hey, Gage has a question?
We do.
I understand B1 and B2 are probably marked because they're change orders, but I was wondering, since we're getting technical and you guys are up here, can we also talk a little bit about B3 and what that means too?
Right, that is a change order from, actually, it's not a change order, it's actually a resolution approving the purchase of 6 roll-off bins for that hook lift truck that we just talked about. Right now, the bins we have are roughly about 29 years old, and they're pretty rough. We've patched them numerous times, and they're just deteriorated to the point where they probably should be, just for public safety, getting around those in the recycling area, first of all.
Sure.
But probably one of the main reasons would be the hook lift point on the new truck will actually be at a different height. So the new bins would have to match that. The current ones we have now, for some reason, back when it was first purchased, it was a custom height, and it was like a 31-inch height, which is not standard by any means this day. There is like a 30 or a 53 and a 62-inch heights right now. And the hook lift we have would actually be adjustable for either 53-inch or 62. So we can keep our options open for other equipment on the road.
Well, thank you.
Go ahead, Will.
So just to clarify, roll-off bins are like dumpsters.
Correct.
Okay. Wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Just a recommendation and, you know, when you have, your base purchase and then change orders, if you can, in the, council memo, that could be converted into a table of some type versus a bunch of text. It'll be real clear to us. All the numbers add, everything's cool, more explanatory. And obviously the presentation was good on that. It certainly helped me appreciate that, just going forward.
Okay.
Thanks.
We'll make a note of that. And just for everybody's information too, I think as you've seen in the agenda memo, we're all still under budget for all these extras that we're looking for.
Thank you.
All right,
Appreciate
thank
your
you.
time. All right, the rest of the agenda is not marked. No items are marked for discussion. Any questions on anything on the agenda? After B3. All right, that brings us to the conclusion and the closed session. Is Councilmember Menzer going to join us for that?
I believe so. She's still
I
on.
think so.
Okay.
You can get me on if you can, log me in. Do I need to log out and,
We'll call you, Sarah.
okay, sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
Mayor, I move to adjourn to closed session regarding litigation and real estate transactions as permitted under section 21.51C and section 21.51J of the Code of Iowa, 4 separate matters.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding litigation and real estate transactions as permitted under section 21.51C and section 21.51J of the Code of Iowa. Any questions or discussion before we vote? Can we have the council statement, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. I have reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed sessions and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Sections 21.51C and 21.51J.
Thanks, Kara. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Miskman?
Yep.
Mayor Abu Wasley?
Yes.
Ms. Menzer?
Yes.
Mr. Brandt?
Yes.
Mr. Sterned?
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. We're adjourned to closed session.